All right, today we're going to be talking about en passant capturing. This is a special rule that pertains to the only time in chess where we are able to capture a piece without landing on it. I'm going to put my chessboard up here on the screen so we can all talk about this together. Now, first of all, this is, I know, funny words. En passant is not even English. It's actually a French term that the direct translation is in passing, but no one ever refers to this as the in passing rule. It's always referred to as the French term, en passant. So, en passant capturing, like I said, it refers to the only time that we can capture a piece by moving past it instead of landing on top of it. And it's always going to be a pawn capturing another pawn, and it's always going to be in a specific part of the board at a specific time. So this is a very obscure rule that doesn't come into play very often. And to understand why this weird rule exists, we kind of have to understand a little bit about chess history. Not a whole lot, but the fact is that chess is a very old game. And over the course of many hundreds of years, the rules have kind of changed a little bit. So, for example, with pawns, they didn't always have the ability to advance two squares if they hadn't moved before. That was a rule that was introduced somewhere between 400 and 800 years ago. The history is a little bit fuzzy on that because we don't have a lot of written records from that time. And also, the rule kind of changed geographically at different times in different parts of the world, depending on when they started, picking up that these rules were changing in the way that chess was played in other parts of the world. So, along with this two-step advance for pawns that had never moved before, became a problem. The fact that pawns could now evade being captured by using that two-step move if there was an enemy pawn waiting for it right there, right? So, en passant is a rule that's supposed to be kind of to balance that out. So, let's say we're a few turns into a game, and for some reason, the board looks like this. This black player here is about to take a two-step move with their queen's pawn to d5, and they land right next to this enemy pawn who is waiting for it. So the en passant rule says we can't use a two-step move to avoid being captured on this square here. So this white pawn is actually allowed to capture this black pawn by moving past it. Instead of landing on top of it, we land on the square that it would have been in if it had only taken a one-step move. I know it's a little weird. Let's go through another scenario where it's going to be a white pawn being captured by a black pawn this way. So let's say that the next couple of turns go like this, like this, like this, maybe like this. Again, these are kind of non-standard opening moves here. I'm just trying to get the pieces into the right spots. So let's say this C pawn is about to double move up to that C4 square and land next to the enemy black pawn that's waiting there for it. In this moment, the black pawn has the privilege of capturing en passant, capturing in passing. It's going to move past the white pawn diagonally into the square that it would have been in if that white pawn had only taken a one-step move. So we're going to go right here with the black pawn, and the white pawn is captured. So to recap, few important things we need to understand about en passant capturing. Number one, it's only for pawns, right? So we're never going to see a bigger piece capturing something without landing directly on it. And we're never even going to see a pawn capturing a bigger piece by moving past it. This is always only going to be a pawn capturing another pawn. The other important things that we need to remember are kind of the things that we've already clarified here is the timing and location of when and where we can use this rule. So it's always going to be when, it's always going to be right after a pawn takes a two-step move, right? If we rewind right here, this is the two-step move. En passant has to happen immediately right afterwards. Because if we neglect to take advantage of this rule, or if we choose not to act upon this rule, like in this example here, if the black pawn does not capture en passant and they do something else this turn instead, then they lose the ability to do that on later turns, regardless of whether or not this white pawn stays here. If the white player does their move and now we're back to the black player's turn, that black pawn has lost its privilege to capture en passant. It's something that we can only do immediately after a two-step move, right? And in addition to what pieces are involved and when it can happen, the where is also important. And this is obviously going to be row 4 for a white pawn, right? If a white pawn is being captured en passant, it had to have just taken its 2-step move, which means it's going from row 2 into row 4. So white pawns can only be captured en passant when they land in row 4. And likewise, if we rewind back to our first example here, a black pawn that's moving 2 steps is always going to be landing in row 5 because we know that they always start in row 7. So if a black pawn just took its 2-step move, it's in row 5. The only time that a black pawn can be captured en passant is if it's in row 5, right after it took its 2-step move. So that's pretty much all that you need to know about en passant capturing. I hope that that was easy to digest and simple to understand. It's a rule that shouldn't come up too often in your games because if both players on each side of the table understand this rule, then most of the time we're going to be avoiding putting ourselves in that predicament. But it's important to understand for those reasons. I hope that everybody enjoyed this lesson. I'll see you next time.